The importance of theurgy in the lives of the late Platonists cannot be undervalued. Philosophy is purifying, religion illuminating, but theurgy is uplifting. Together, these observances enable the practitioner to rise above their mortal life to participate in immortal life. For Iamblichus and Proclus and Ficino, it is inappropriate to consider them simply philosophers or simply theurgists. These two elements are so interwoven as to lose distinction. One element can no more be removed from the other while keeping either intact than a person can survive without their heart, or a heart can survive without its person. This is living theurgy. Jeffrey Kupperman, Living Theurgy. I am Snow, and welcome to the Cyberforest Speaks, where the roots and the circuitry are one, online at snowthegoth.com. In this episode, I want to talk about the exoteric and esoteric, the occult and the mundane, the profound and the profane, occultism and paganism. Now, I self-identify as both a pagan and an occultist. I know plenty who identify as one or the other, and not so many who identify as both. By definition, occult simply means hidden, much as esoteric does. But occultism has its roots in modern movements and magic, as found in the writings of people from Johannes Trithemius, John Dee, and Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa, through to Aleister Crowley, Samuel Liddell MacGregor Mathers, Antoine Court de Gebelin, Eliphas Levi, Helena Blavatsky, and others. It has its roots in Western Christianity, largely either in Roman Catholicism or various Protestant movements, and pulls from a lot of the ad fontes ideology of the Renaissance era and Romanticist thought. These were thinkers fascinated by the ancient world and with an inclination towards romanticizing, if not outright fetishizing, anything pre-Christian, oft with the idea that the older something is, the purer it must be. This paved the way for the development of Wicca, modern Druidry, modern heathenry, and other modern religions and movements too. By and large, the people I know who refer to themselves as pagan follow a historically informed religion, drawing inspiration from pre-Christian Europe, pre-Christian Northern Africa, and/or pre-Christian West Asia, pre-Islamic Northern Africa, pre-Islamic West Asia, and so on. The people I know who refer to themselves as occultists tend to look to more recent historical works for inspiration, and have lives and practices that put a heavier emphasis on magic for one end or another. Occultists may invert Christian imagery a lot, whilst pagans seek to avoid it, to give an example of a difference I see, anecdotally speaking. So this leads us to the differences between esotericism and exotericism. As stated earlier, the esoteric is that which is hidden. Beyond this, definitions vary. To give the definitions of esoteric and esotericism from the Secret History of Western Esotericism podcast's glossary. Esoteric. This term has many shades of meaning, and its exact parameters are hotly debated within the academic study of Western esotericism. This podcast's default definition is simply presented as being meant only for the initiated. Unpacking this a little bit, information is esoteric if 1. It is presented as being accessible only to a select group, and 2. If it is presented as being wisdom of a higher order. Esotericism, a more specific term than, but included under the umbrella of, the esoteric, we take esotericism to refer to social practices which construct or enforce distinctions between an initiated group and a non-initiated group, or further within the initiated group, defined in terms of access to qualitatively higher knowledge. Esotericism would thus refer to things like the restriction of access to documents in religious movements, from early Christianity to Scientology, the Pythagorean or Masonic use of tokens and membership recognition or passwords, divisions of the in-group into further subdivisions depending on the level of quote-unquote progress a given member of the group has made along the path toward higher knowledge and this sort of thing. The Rejected Religion podcast puts it that the eso of esoteric refers to that which is internal, whilst exo is outside, external. Now, whilst I have struggled to think of words beginning with eso as a prefix as such, for exo we have many, such as exoskeleton. To talk more simply of how I see this divide explored in my own experiences, a ritual, that is, the speaking of prayers and giving of offerings, something very physical and observable, is exoteric, whereas divinatory arts, magical rites, meditative practices and the like would be considered esoteric. The exoteric is the obvious, the blatant, the mundane, the observable. Placing offerings on a shrine and speaking some prayers as part of a quick morning ritual before heading out the door to work. That is an exoteric rite. Studying the runes, for instance, from a linguistic angle, would be exoteric. But once you engage in runic magic or divination, then it becomes esoteric. If you're summoning a spirit or entity, that's esoteric. So as you can imagine, following on from that, lines blur, and a hard binary distinction can become unhelpful and unhealthy at times. Returning to the matter of pagans and occultists, in conversations with occultists, many of them in my experience do not see much in the way of a distinction, whereas pagans I talk to very much do. To talk in terms of negative stereotypes and ideas held by each towards the other as I have witnessed them, occultists view pagans as historically minded elitists, dressing up as Vikings or Romans or what have you, praising gods and not going further to really develop anything. Pagans view occultists as the cause of the satanic panic, often using appropriative practices and continuing problematic ideas as they neglect religious devotion to focus on a very egotistical magical practice. Obviously, these caricatures that are built up from such views do little benefit to anyone, but they do touch on traces of truths that people across pagan and occult communities would do well to consider and reckon with. For a start, the focus on history, historical accuracy, and providing attestations becomes a plague for all when used to browbeat, mock, dismiss, or when they are the walls rather than the foundation. History is there to be built upon, not to limit. Secondly, the matter of aesthetics. This is something many of us on all sides have gone into at length, but suffice to say, if it isn't a personal aesthetic choice but something you consider part of the package, as it were, then consider why that is and how it adds magically or devotionally or spiritually to what you are doing. And if the answer is that it doesn't, but is merely historical, then question how meaningful it truly is. As for the issue of not going far enough and achieving anything, or not being pious enough, those are highly contestable and judgmental statements. Not everyone wants to or is interested in or should be doing magic, divination or the like, and there is nothing wrong with that. Anyone can, but not everyone should. As with any given group, community or space, it may be for anyone, but it cannot be for everyone. Personally, I have always encouraged the notion of having an exoteric foundation before considering getting into esoteric practices or studies. Have a religious framework first, then get into magic, divination, spirit work, necromancy or the like. Things such as Hermeticism or witchcraft, then, work upon a foundation of religion as the extracurricular studies or practices upon an existing worldview, an existing theological stance regarding the divine, upon existing routine practices such as prayers or offerings. This also serves to reduce the sense of overwhelm that newcomers encounter. It helps structure a path of sorts for learning, allowing for forks in the road later down the line should people choose to go one way or another, diving into the esoteric, the magical divination, or something like deeper philosophy or the like. We see intersection of the occult with media and different subcultural ideas as expressed through the term occulture, a portmanteau of occult and culture. Rejected Religion credits the term to Genesis P. Orridge, whereas Wiktionary credits it to Simon Dwyer's usage in Rapid Eye magazine. I use occultdom to refer to the broader community of occultists and their works, in much the same way pagandom is used to refer to pagan spaces, or Christendom was used historically to refer to the regions considered primarily to be inhabited by Christians and their culture. A culture, however, is the intersection of the occult and culture, or the occult and subculture. References to the occult or occult ideas within media demonstrate this, from the alchemical symbols and pentacles used in the artwork of both metal bands and goth bands, to the use of magic and magicians as moral counters to seemingly rational or predominantly Christian protagonists within fiction. Consider fantasy tropes of noble knights defeating malicious warlocks, or heroes going to destroy the black magical workings of evil satanic cults and the like. To give a lengthy quote from Christopher Partridge's Introduction to the Occult World, linked to in the notes section of the episode, it is, for example, irrefutably the case that traditional forms of institutional Christianity in Western liberal democracies, particularly in Europe, are experiencing a significant decline in power, popularity, and prestige. Institutional religion may be flourishing beyond the West, and it may still occupy a place of significance in the public life of the United States, but generally speaking, the evidence seems to support a narrative of secularization. On the other hand, within this progressively secular environment where modernization appeared to be highly corrosive of religion, there is a conspicuous, widespread and vibrant interest in the paranormal, the pursuit of experiences of transcendence, the acquisition of occult knowledge, and the development of some form of mysticism or inner life spirituality. In particular, occult and paranormal ideas have become everyday and ordinary, thanks largely to the media and popular culture. From the advertising of products that claim to promote well-being, to the ubiquity of musical and visual cultures fascinated with occultism and experiences of the paranormal, discourses antagonistic to secularization are being circulated within everyday life. Furthermore, there is evidence for a two-way relationship between, on the one hand, underground ideas emanating from what the sociologist Colin Campbell had identified as the cultic milieu, and on the other hand, the well-being claims for beauty products, the themes of popular television series, the growth of interest in mind-body-spirit products, cyber-spirituality on the internet, and yoga classes in the local village hall. In short, there is evidence for an influential culture of enchantment, which encompasses the marginal and the mainstream, the deviant and the conventional, and which circulates ideas, creates synergies, and forms new trajectories, all of which are driven by wider cultural forces, particularly those of popular culture and the media. Hence, while often rejected and marginalized by society's religious and intellectual gatekeepers, the esoteric ideas that are generated, articulated, and disseminated within our culture are deceptively significant. Partridge also goes on to talk in this introduction about how both Christian theology and the pushes for scientific rationalism in the early modern period position the occult where it has wound up for centuries in the Western world, and I wonder if this bleeds into some of the tension many who self-identify as pagans feel towards those who self-identify as occultists, or what those pagans point to as parts of occultism, from a perceived irrationality and superstition through to a sense of evilness and moral judgment, or even a reputation within occultdom for sympathies towards the politically far right. After all, subcultures have problems because culture has problems. People have problems. I wonder also if the existence of a culture and its blurring of occult imagery, beliefs and practices with media, both alternative and mainstream, has a significant impact upon the sense newcomers to pagandom or occultdom or adjacent spaces that they ought to be engaging with things such as magic, astrology, talismans, spells, divination, and so on. After all, the fact that the perceived experts are the ones within pagandom and occultdom writing books, recording podcasts, and making videos are the ones with the expertise, knowledge, and experience in such topics does make them seem representative of the entire community or communities. If the Pope was the first Catholic one saw, and this was deemed representative of Catholicism as a whole, if not Christianity writ large, many Catholics, or even Christians, would be seeking to emulate the Pope under the impression that to be like that is to practice the religion. How many occultists endeavour to mimic Crowley, Agrippa, or Mathers? How many pagans seek to become expert spirit workers or authors writing about the intersection of archaeology and religion through the methodologies of reconstruction? How many times do we see people donning robes, arguing about beards, or investing in expensive statues, altar cloths, and other miscellanea they feel is needed for the part because of seeing these examples? Now, I think enough different points have come up around the identities of pagans and occultists, the differences between the esoteric and the exoteric, so I shall cease here. As usual, the next entry in the Cyber Forest shall appear in a fortnight. Until then. What if everything around you isn't quite as it seems? What if all the world you think you know is an